step into the shadows with me for just a second. Come on, lean in close. Because today, well, we aren't just looking at a guy who fights inside a steel cage. We're unlocking a deeply guarded psychological mystery. In this explainer, we're going to slip right beneath the skin of one of the most polarizing, utterly unpredictable figures in modern sports. We're pulling back the layers of a man who wears his controversies like this thick, impenetrable shell. But beneath that armor, there's a secret. A paradox so profound, it's going to make you question absolutely everything you see on the surface. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to sit with this question for a second. Just imagine a man whose entire public existence is defined by raw, unadulterated aggression. You know the type, right? Shouting down opponents, spewing the most unfiltered, confrontational rhetoric you can possibly imagine. A guy who literally thrives in chaos and begs for war. But what if all that noise isn't actually a display of fearless dominance? What if, brilliantly and tragically, it's a meticulously crafted illusion? What if the loudest, most violent man in the room is actually just trying to drown out the echoes of a past that terrifies him? Seriously, who could possibly embody a contradiction this extreme?
Plus 540. Now that isn't just a number, it's the mathematical definition of the impossible. Against all odds, against literally every prediction, this was the betting line when Sean Strickland stepped into the Octagon against the seemingly untouchable middleweight champion Israel Adesanya. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gave him a chance. Yet Strickland walked forward, completely unflinching, marching straight into the fire to execute a monumental, incredibly violent upset and claim the undisputed gold. But you know, the story of how he got that belt, it's absolutely nothing compared to the story of what it takes for him to just survive his own mind.
To the rest of the world, Sean Strickland is a wrecking ball. He's built this hyper-masculine, aggressively brash public persona that alienates just as many people as it attracts. And he wears this identity everywhere he goes. It's loud, it's totally unapologetic, and honestly, it acts as an incredibly thick armor. Think about it. When you're constantly pushing people away with extreme behavior, you're making absolutely sure that no one ever gets close enough to see the cracks. So let's take a closer look at exactly what this armor is made of.
If you follow his public footprint, the image is completely uncompromising. He's a massive, extremely vocal advocate for the Second Amendment, proudly flaunting large stashes of ammunition at his home. He's even openly taken to social media to push for an armed revolution. He aligns himself with some incredibly polarizing right-wing political views and makes a habit of delivering unfiltered, often deeply offensive statements, pretty much at every press conference. He isn't just courting controversy, you guys. He is marrying it. He surrounds himself with this fiery barricade of extreme stances, keeping the entire world safely at arm's length.
And this quote right here captures the absolute height of that controversial armor. He's openly stated on the record, giving women rights and power in society has negatively impacted America. He argues that women belong in strictly traditional domestic roles and that societal advancement for women has actually weakened the country. Now, whatever your views on that, it's a statement clearly designed to shock, to provoke, and to draw a hard, impenetrable line in the sand. It's kind of the ultimate defensive mechanism, right? Be so intensely abrasive that people focus entirely on your words and they completely miss the man trembling right behind them. But here is where the illusion really begins to unravel. Look at this stark contrast. On one hand, we have the monster he projects, the loud, violent, highly controversial cage fighter who actively alienates the public. But on the other, we have the whispered reality, a deeply traumatized, highly isolated man who quietly relies on trauma support groups just to make it through the week. The brutal champion and the fragile survivor are occupying the exact same mind. And eventually, an armor built that thick is bound to show a crack. And that crack, it appeared in the most unexpected of places. The hardcore, completely uncompromising gun advocate suddenly posted on social media from a post office stating, "I generally don't agree with gun-free zones, but I don't think anyone needs to be armed here, including me." For a man whose entire brand is built on being armed to the teeth and ready for war at a moment's notice, this was a stunning, absolute reversal. It was this fleeting, super vulnerable moment of pure, practical humanity just slipping right through the facade. And the reaction to this vulnerability? Oh, it was immediate. Are you going soft? That was the immediate, pretty vicious backlash from his very own fan base. They mocked him, asking if he was going to start driving an electric car and eating bugs next. The world he built to protect himself instantly turned on him. The second he steps out of the character of the bloodthirsty, armed madman and shows even a shred of normal human hesitation, they attack. It's like he's trapped inside his own monster. Which brings us to the darkest, most intimate question of all. If the violence is just a mask, if the loud controversies are just a shield, what is he really hiding? Where does this insatiable, desperate need for absolute control truly originate? Come on, let's step away from the bright lights of the press conferences and the roar of the arena. Let's travel back into the shadows of his past, to a childhood that is going to completely change the way you look at this champion. His origin story is, well, it's profoundly tragic. At just 6 years old, his father introduced him to a communal box of highly explicit adult content, robbing him of his innocence before his life had even truly begun. By the time he was 14, the trauma had manifested into such intense, terrifying, violent urges that he began extreme fighting disciplines, literally just to keep himself from hurting others or himself. And at 17, while preparing for a fight, he experienced a non-consensual sexual encounter with older women, an event he later bravely identified as assault. The psychological scars here run unimaginably deep. So how exactly does a mind survive that level of compounding trauma? It builds rigid, desperate walls. It builds a daily survival guide. Step 1. Engage in extreme, exhausting MMA training just to channel those violent impulses. Step 2. Isolate from the public to avoid any unpredictable triggers. Step 3. Strictly avoid alcohol, terrified that even a single drink might dismantle his precarious restraint. And Step 4. Quietly attend trauma support groups. You see, fighting, for Sean Strickland, isn't just a sport. No. It is a tightly controlled, meticulously maintained coping mechanism to prevent a total loss of sanity. But perhaps the most tantalizing, fascinating twist in this entire psychological profile is his relationship with women. We remember the armor, right? We remember the loud, provocative statements claiming women shouldn't have power or rights in society. But when you look past the microphone, when you look at the actual pillars holding his fragile life together, you discover a stunning contradiction. The very demographic he publicly disparages is the exact demographic keeping him tethered to reality. Just look at the facts behind the fiction. He credits his ultimate career success and his championship title entirely to his wife, admitting she lived practically like a prisoner to support him during an intense 6-month fight camp. His closest friend and confidant in the MMA media space, a woman. Reporter Nina Marie Danielle, whose presence actually brings out a rare, genuine smile in him. The man who claims women belong solely in traditional domestic roles relies profoundly, almost desperately, on female emotional support to navigate his own darkness. Just listen to this raw, beautiful confession he made about his wife. I always felt like all I was that blue check mark in my logo. I give the credit for my best success to her. In a moment of pure, unscripted vulnerability, the toughest man on the planet admitted that without the woman standing behind him, his entire identity dissolves into nothing. She made him realize he is so much more than just a fighter, more than just the violence he portrays. She is literally his anchor in a raging storm. And so, the two extreme halves of Sean Strickland stand face to face. On one side, we have the unapologetic, fiercely controversial champion of the Octagon, the man who bleeds and breaks bones for our entertainment. On the other, the deeply vulnerable healing survivor of profound childhood abuse, a man terrified of his own shadow, relying on the love of a woman to keep him whole. The lines between the monster we judge and the victim we pity are completely hopelessly blurred. Which leaves us with one final, haunting thought to take away from this explainer. When the loudest, most aggressive armor in the world is simply built to hide the deepest, most devastating scars, who is really in that cage? When the cage door locks and the lights go down, are we watching a champion fight his opponents, Or is he just fighting his own terrifying reflection? I'll let you decide. Thanks for joining me in the shadows. We'll dive into another fascinating mind very, very soon.